Hi, I'm Melissa Bill, and welcome to the Business Roundup, where we catch up with the movers and shakers in the business world. Today, joining me again, which I love having him on the show, is Vijay Marolia. He's a fund manager and chief investment officer at Regal Point Capital, and he's been featured on Fox, Wharton Business, you name it, NTD. So thank you for joining
Thank you
us
for
today.
having me.
Yeah,
Melissa,
I appreciate it.
it's always a pleasure. And my, oh my, it looks like we have a lot of things to talk about. I mean, the year is over in like 6 weeks, but there's like more than a dozen things going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like evolving, every day there's just something else happening, especially in business and finance.
Never a boring moment.
Well, before we I guess we're going to get started. Well, one of the things right now is AI is still, front and center out there. And everybody keeps, kind of waiting for it to either bust or bubble or something to happen. What is your forecast for AI as far as I know it consumes a lot of energy. There's, talks as far as being able to meet that energy demand. What do you think is going to happen in that area?
Melissa, that's kind of like the biggest question right now in markets because there are two camps. And one of them is this is the beginning of a boom. And the other one is this is a bubble and perhaps it has already burst. So let's kind of look at the first camp. Well, a lot of us probably never heard of Chat GPT 5 years ago, or let's call it before COVID. Very few of us were using AI prior to then. Some people weren't even using it 2 years ago. But I would say a very significant percentage of working professionals, students, entrepreneurs, research professionals, they're using AI today. The question is this: are the growth rates realistic? So what do I mean by that? Typically, when you look at a company, you're looking at the money that it makes and what it spends. And if it's a good company, it will have a profit left over. But there are some companies, especially when technology starts to accelerate, like Amazon is a perfect example. They didn't make money in terms of a profit for so long, but their stock price went through the roof, continues to. Now they make tons of money. So it's about a balance. What money does the company need to earn today versus what money should it reinvest in its future? So here's the bottom line. People are wondering whether there's actual end demand in all of this AI spend for these data centers, right? So here's the way the dots connect. AI is basically going to be where the end demand is. Hey, how can I artificially use this program, the software, to do the homework assignment? And I'm not going to lie, it's amazing. I had to do investment banking research that would have taken, no lie, more than 2 weeks. It did it while I was driving in my Tesla Cybertruck. And that's not me bragging. Maybe it is me bragging a little bit, but whatever. It happened while I was driving. Grok 4 did the research for me. Now, am I going to submit that? No, but it saved me time, money, energy, and effort. Now, how many people are doing that? Probably not that many. So that's when it comes down to end demand. But here's what people are concentrating on. Is money just being shifted from one company to another to another? On Wall Street, is this a capitalist circulature? In other words, OpenAI sending $100 billion to Oracle. Oracle is sending $100 billion to NVIDIA. NVIDIA is sending $100 billion to OpenAI. And OpenAI sending that back. So is there end demand, or is this just an accounting gimmickry?
And that kind of moves us into the next topic is the stock market. It's been, volatile. There's been ups and downs. It's been, the crypto market's been all over. But is it becoming more like a casino? Is this becoming more of like a, you don't know what you're going to get type of scenario?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes, it is a casino. It's always been the world's biggest casino. But here's what I want our listeners and our viewers to think about. You can invest traditionally in a way that's not gambling, and that is investing in a growing pie. So investing in the American economy has usually been a good long-term bet. Why? Because the American economy encourages growth. That growth, which we measure in a nerdy term called GDP, is basically just an amalgamation of, do we have more people? Are they going to spend more money? And is that money going to go to businesses that will make more profits? which in turn means that they can hire more people, create more businesses. So that is not a circle jerk. That's called capitalism. But here's what's happening. Most people that are new entrants into the markets are investing in options, and they're investing into short dated options. How short? 0 days to maturity. That's a lottery ticket. Okay. So what is the difference between going to the 7-Eleven and buying a 0 dated option? No one's going to stab you in the neck at the 0 dated option, but the amount of winning probability might not differ too much. Okay. It just wastes time to go to the seven. First of all, I don't want 7-Eleven to sue me. Actually, I may or may not be a shareholder. I think it's still owned by a Japanese company that is being sought out by a Canadian company. So I may or may not be involved in that. But at the same time, it's not about 7-Eleven's fault. It's the fault of the lack of financial literacy.
Good.
No wonder they don't understand how to invest their money. So they think that investing is gambling. And then they see Post Malone, happy, face tatted up. Look at how much I won. Here's what saddens me. And Melissa, I want to ask you, do you think this is smart? Why am I required to disclose more about myself and my research report? I've been managing money professionally for 20 years. If I wasn't doing a good job, I wouldn't have a job anymore. But I have to disclose more than Post Malone has to on an advertise where he's convincing kids to lose money that they probably didn't even earn.
That's true. So yeah, so your point is definitely like if the stock market, if done the correct way and invest in like long term or in the right way, kind of spread out, it could be a very good thing if people know how to do it and how to like invest properly.
Well, not only could it be, but like if we just look at the facts. So, it's like facts versus feelings, right? So there's only been one billionaire to ever have over the long term. And this wasn't a startup, okay? Because there's a bunch of people that, they have startup. As soon as the Federal Reserve and let's call it certain administrations started just writing blank checks, giving everybody money, that's why everything costs so much, right? But there used to be a time when the money was backed up. I think that's one of the reasons why gold and precious metal prices have gone up so much. Hopefully you'll have me, I don't sound like a broken record, hopefully, but as you can see, that thesis was not incorrect. Agreed?
Yeah, oh
You've seen what's
definitely.
happening to gold and silver, right? And so my concern is that the kids that are working hard, let's say, bussing tables or doing their Uber deliveries, but then if they're going to take that money and instead of buying a share of Airbnb because it's cheap, even though the stock is like somewhat down, they can see that the company makes more money than most companies and it makes more money than Marriott. People don't even realize that. No, but instead, they would rather buy a share or a option contract on a company that doesn't make any money, but they saw it on Discord or somebody on social media. And because of the lack of financial literacy, I think that they might learn a hard lesson.
This kind of leads into another section. So, talking about casinos and stuff like that. Another thing that has been in the news is sports betting and the legalization. We could talk a little bit about that because, I think was it NBA that they were talking about? I think that was what was going on, the recent
Well,
story. But with, professional sports and stuff, what are the pros and cons of legalizing that?
so I think the pros of it are that just by calling it something that's legal, you necessitate there's less crime. In other words, if you were to make jaywalking legal, then immediately you have less crime of jaywalking. Because it's a definition, right? But here's the bad one. Guess who wins when gambling increases? Guess.
Well, usually, like I
It's
would say probably the criminals. I don't know. So
or the casino owners, right,
yeah,
right,
they can
right.
see. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now, and so is that a business that we want to suck up the funds? Now, I think there are two arguments to this. Number one, America is about freedom. And if in the world that I want, where people have more financial literacy, they should be allowed to gamble. Just like they should be allowed to cross the street even when there's a car coming. But you're going to learn the hard way that you're going to get killed. You shouldn't do that, right? Oh, it's illegal to touch a hot stove. Well, then you're going to get a lot of people burning up because they don't understand that there's a hot stove. And see, here's what it is. Pain plus reflection equals progress. Those are not my words. Ray Dalio gave that to me, taught that to me, not personally, but in his book Principles. And today, pain, there's no time for it to be a plus progress. People are just avoiding all pain, but pain is an important signal. And without important signals, how can one learn, right? So if you're reading a textbook, there'll be a heading, a table of contents. Your teacher will call a timeout. Let's do an example. That's a signal that something is significant. That's what prices do. That's what pain is supposed to do. And today, the government is trying to control the prices, and pain is trying to be avoided at all costs, which they don't realize is just ultimately more long-term pain.
Right, in the end. So do you think it would be a bad, like, in your opinion, like legalizing sports betting, do you think it would be a bad thing?
Full disclosure, I bet on sports and I enjoy it, but I do it because let's say that I am at, you ever been invited to, let's say, a social event, and you know at that social event, well, they might have a TV, it might be during a game, you may or may not be interested in the people that are there. If I'm somewhere and I know that there's a good game on, and if I'm going to watch the game for a couple hours, I know how to make it interesting. So maybe I'll put a little bit of money on it. I'm not expecting to have that be my career. Okay. Now, listen, I may or may not have run a sports book in college, so I understand that the house wins in the long run. But now let me play devil's advocate. Because it's been legalized, it's become like the options market. So I think that sports books are using something similar to the Black-Scholes model, some sort of model where they think they can predict, and here's where people are taking advantage of if there's prop bets. But that's where the danger lies. Because once prop bets get very profitable, the players start to cheat. And we just saw evidence of the players cheating. Same thing happens in business. Same thing happens in anything, whether it's the art world, politics. When people are when they're playing by different rules, morally or otherwise, they're going to play by different.
Exactly, that is true. Now, another thing, because I have heard more about this too, it's the entire insurance industry, from life insurance, your homeowners insurance, different types of insurance. I know even with the homeowners insurance, with the hurricanes and stuff like that, do you think the insurance industry in general is becoming kind of like a scam and having just so I know they always say that they want to try to, put more regulations on it, but what do you think about the industry?
I think the insurance industry, was created for a great reason. It has a lot of things that were created for good reasons, morphed into something that's now maybe not handling or the problems that it was intended to. And instead, it's morphed into another type of monster. So I've been licensed with insurance, even though if you would have told me that in school, I would have been like, well, why would I don't want to be an insurance agent. But I worked in the wealth management industry before we launched Regal Point Capital, because what a lot of people don't realize is that anytime you have let's call it a significant worth, I'm not talking about $1 million, I'm talking about 50 million plus, okay? And 10 million liquid, you need a team now, because the tax code and the significance of the assets, and depending on the nature of the assets, it's one thing to have stock in Apple. That's easy. I could press a button. I could call some people, depending on what stock you have, and I can get the stock sold. But what if you own a hotel, even if it's a Ritz-Carlton? How many people are qualified to buy a Ritz-Carlton? I'll tell you how many. Not as many as you think. What I'm trying to get to is that although we already know, quote unquote, that prices are based on supply and demand, a lot of the processes don't account for that. And so when it comes to insurance, what's happened is that people are realizing that, wait a minute, people are willing to pay as little as 2, as high as 5+% of the value of an asset per year to insure its value. And so how do you defend against what people might call price gouging? You allow competitors to enter. So here's the scam, Melissa, and here's what I want our viewers and our listeners to think about and try to get involved in. Insurance is one scam because you're not allowed to compete throughout states. Every state has their own insurance BS regulatory framework. And that's why it's so hard. And Obamacare was a disaster. And here's the good news. You can self-insure. If you look at the New York Times article about a family, they're basically trying to make it the worst. Well, they have $1,000 a month health insurance. So imagine if you just put that in your Roth IRA or put that in NVIDIA stock every month for 5, 10 years. Now, it doesn't matter what cancer you have. You got it. Listen, we don't have a crystal ball, but there's always an answer to every problem. If there's no answer to a problem, no solution to a problem, it's not a problem. It's just called the way shit is. It's called life. But what I'm saying is that insurance is making people think life is harder than it needs to be. Okay. And so I want to encourage people, just like you have your own community networks and your own social networks, you can insure the same way, but your insurance agent doesn't want to tell you that because they don't get paid to tell you that. You can create your own insurance group, learn about it, and hopefully Melissa will have me back so I can explain more about it.
That's a very cool concept because even, another thing as far as health insurance, some people don't want the typical regular like type health. They want holistic, they want different things. And I've heard of like subgroups of like holistic health, like little insurance plans where people are paying into it so that they can use it how they want to use it and not just have to be like, oh, you can only go to that doctor, you can't go here. So that makes
Right.
sense. So you're going to see more of that, you think? Definitely. Well, I mean, as always, as we kind of wrap things up, anything you want to leave the audience with as far as just some things to look out for in the next week in the world of finance?
Well, how about this? Yes, in the world of finance, look at the risk more than the reward, but in the real world, because finance wouldn't matter if we didn't have each other. I think the best thing we could do, start our days right. I do it during my morning power walk. Think about 3 people, even one person that you are thankful for, and then think about why you're thankful for them. Maybe send them a text. Maybe reach out to them, whatever, buy them something, give them a Christmas gift. But you cannot be depressed and grateful at the same time. Facts.
That's true. So you have give a little bit of, what do you call it? Not
Gratitude.
gratefulness,
Yep.
but yeah, exactly. Positive. No, thank you. But it's always a joy to have you on the show. And I really appreciate it. And we're definitely going to do it sooner than later. So hopefully we'll
Sweet.
be talking soon.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you as always. And take care, listeners and viewers. See you next time.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for joining the Business Roundup, where we always try to bring you interviews with some of the leading people in business, whether it be technology, finance, or energy. I hope you tune in. I hope you subscribe and listen, and we'll give you updates for new interviews that are coming up. Until next time, I'm Melissa Bell.